I never thought working at a fast food place would completely ruin my life. At first, I was just trying to save money for my future, all while attending college. It was supposed to be temporary, a means to an end, but it turned out to be the thing that shattered my plans. It all began during a typical summer shift at the drive-thru window. I was stuck in the same monotonous routine, handing out orders to the endless line of cars. Most of the time, the people in the cars blurred together, just another faceless interaction. But that day, someone stood out, someone I would never forget. The driver was unremarkable, just a guy with a blank look on his face. But the woman sitting next to him, her, I remember. She wore the most ridiculous ketchup red wig, completely out of place with her overall look. I tried not to stare as I focused on the order screen. Her boyfriend ordered a Big Mac meal with a Sprite, while she got a 10-piece nugget meal with a large high C. That might seem trivial, but I mention it because I made sure they got exactly what they ordered. I handed them their drinks first, then the bag of food. Her boyfriend didn't reach for it. She did. She snatched it from my hands with a glare, a ravenous, dirty look as if I'd insulted her. I've seen plenty of weird stuff while working, so I brushed it off, offered a quick, "Have a nice day," and moved on. They sped off, and I figured that was the last I'd see of them. I was wrong. Not even a minute later, I spotted her again, storming into the restaurant. I was grabbing a McFlurry cup when I saw her standing there, hands on her hips, waiting impatiently to speak to the manager. Something about her screamed trouble. By the time I'd made the McFlurry, the manager was already dealing with her. They started yelling at each other almost immediately. "You think you can insult my staff?" my manager shouted, clearly not in the mood to put up with her nonsense. Things escalated faster than I could process. Out of nowhere, she spat in his face. What happened next was a blur. My manager, in a moment of fury, slapped her across the face. He disappeared into his office right after, probably realizing he'd crossed a line. But that only made things worse. The woman went berserk. She started screaming at the top of her lungs, knocking over cups, throwing straws across the counter. "What, you think I'm stupid? You think I can't count? I ordered a 10-piece, not a 9-piece. She was so loud, so wild, that my co-workers tried to step in, but she was out of control. She grabbed a plexiglass divider from the counter and hurled it like a weapon, nearly hitting one of my co-workers in the face. Blood spurted as the edge of the glass sliced their temple. That's when she turned her attention to me. "Where's the girl who gave me my food?" she screamed. "She's gonna pay for this." I froze. She was talking about me. My heart raced as I watched her jump the counter, her eyes locked on mine. But before she could reach me, a small group of employees managed to grab her and throw her out of the store. I thought that would be the end of it. But she kept coming back, like a nightmare that wouldn't go away. Each time she'd storm in, throwing more things, screaming about her chicken nuggets. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the manager shouted, "The cops are on their way. You really want to go to jail over this?" That seemed to scare her off. She vanished before the police arrived. When the cops finally showed up, they took some statements and a copy of the security footage. I thought that was the end of it. But days passed, and there was no word. Weeks went by. No arrest. No justice. Months later, when I had almost forgotten about her, she came back. I was working the drive-thru again when I saw her. Same boyfriend, same red wig. My stomach dropped. I knew it was her instantly. Her eyes were locked on me as they pulled up to the window. This time, though, she didn't look angry. She looked deranged. There was a twisted smile on her face, like she was planning something. But she didn't say a word. She just took her food and drove off, her eyes following me until the car was out of sight. That should have been my warning, but I didn't think much of it. After all, nothing had happened. I figured she got her nuggets and would leave me alone. But as my shift ended and the sun went down, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. Just to be safe, I clutched the small bottle of pepper spray I kept on my keychain as I walked to my car. I barely made it a few steps before I heard footsteps behind me. Fast. Heavy. I turned, heart racing, and saw her charging at me. Without thinking, I sprayed the pepper spray straight into her eyes. I didn't wait to see the results. I bolted to my car, fumbling with my keys, desperate to get inside. But when I looked back, she was still standing, wiping her eyes and screaming, her face red and swollen. She looked like a wild animal, bloodshot eyes filled with rage. Then she charged at me again. I barely managed to get the car door open and lock myself inside when a rock came smashing through my window. Before I could react, her hands were on me, yanking me through the broken glass. She dragged me to the ground, clawing at my face, cutting my skin, punching me again and again. I don't remember how long it lasted. I just curled up, holding my keys tight, praying she wouldn't steal my car. It wasn't until my manager came out shouting that she finally let go and ran off into the night. To this day, she's still out there. The police never found her. I had to quit my job. I moved back in with my parents, too terrified to go outside. I even skipped my college graduation because of how messed up my face was. Now, every time I leave the house, I wonder if she'll be waiting for me, watching, and I'll never forget that awful red wig. I still can't believe how insane my experience at McDonald's was that one Saturday afternoon. It started off like any other weekend. The restaurant was packed as usual. I live in a busy part of the city, so it's no surprise that all the local businesses are swarmed with people. I just didn't expect one of them would almost ruin my day. I walked inside and saw the long lines stretching toward the entrance. McDonald's can be fast, but on weekends it's like chaos. I stood in line, hungry for a Big Mac, watching the employees hustle to keep up. It was a hectic scene, but nothing out of the ordinary, until I met him. As I inched closer to the front of the line, a guy appeared out of nowhere. He looked about my age, maybe a little older, and had that "I don't care" attitude written all over him. He tapped me on the shoulder and asked if he could cut ahead because I just want a glass of water. Real quick, bro, I'm super thirsty. Being nice, I agreed. After all, how long could it take to get a cup of water? He slid ahead of me in line, and for a moment I zoned out, watching the busy staff. Then something strange clicked. I noticed he wasn't just getting water. He was still standing at the counter ordering food. Lots of food. Enough for an entire family. My stomach dropped, and I felt that familiar surge of anger rising up. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" I snapped, tapping him on the shoulder. He barely turned, waving me off with a rude flick of his hand. "What's your problem?" I asked, now annoyed. "You said you were getting water." Without even looking at me, he mumbled, "Changed my mind," and kept ordering like I didn't exist. My fists clenched and I felt like shouting at him, but I kept my cool. When he finally finished ordering, after what felt like ages, I stepped up and ordered my Big Mac. I could still feel the anger boiling in my gut, but I tried to brush it off. I figured that was the end of it. Boy, was I wrong. After placing my order, I saw him standing near the drink machine, filling his cup and looking completely smug. I wasn't going to let it slide. I walked up to him, my patience gone. "You told me you were just getting water," I said, trying to keep my voice low but firm. He smirked, not even caring. "Yeah, well, I changed my mind," he said again, like it was no big deal. "That's not cool, man," I shot back. "You're a terrible person, you know that?" Instead of feeling bad or even apologizing, he looked me dead in the eye and laughed in my face. Furious, I turned and walked away before I did something I'd regret. I wasn't going to fight this jerk in the middle of a McDonald's. But just as I started to walk off, I felt something cold and wet splash against my head. I froze, not believing what had just happened. Slowly, I reached up and felt the sticky liquid running through my hair. He'd thrown his drink at me. The humiliation hit me like a punch in the stomach as I wiped my face, hearing the quiet gasps and murmurs of the people around me. I wanted to fight him. I wanted to make him pay for embarrassing me in front of all those strangers. But instead, I took a deep breath and walked away. A couple of people asked if I was okay and I just nodded. I wasn't about to escalate things. My order was ready before his and I couldn't resist a final jab. I grabbed my food, walked past him and said, "Look who got their order first, loser." He didn't respond, just glared at me. I left, heading toward the parking lot, thinking it was finally over. But again, I was wrong. As I reached my car, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and there he was, the same jerk, carrying his drink and looking even angrier than before. Before I could react, he splashed the drink all over the hood of my car, kicked my headlight, and shouted a string of curses at me. I stood there stunned. Was this really happening over a McDonald's order? I checked my car for damage, but thankfully it looked fine. My rage was through the roof, but I knew getting into a fistfight with this guy wouldn't help anything. So I did the only thing that made sense. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove off. As I drove home, I couldn't shake the absurdity of the whole situation. How could someone act like that over something so stupid? I've never seen him again, and honestly, I hope I never do. Some people just thrive on causing chaos. Looking back, I still hope he learned his lesson. Maybe next time he'll think twice before being such a jerk to people. But I'm not holding my breath. I remember my time working at McDonald's during high school vividly, especially one strange series of events that still baffles me to this day. It was only about 5 minutes from my house, and the job was simple enough: taking orders, making sure customers got their meals quickly, and managing the usual rush. My name's Alex, by the way, and this story still gives me chills whenever I think about it. One Saturday afternoon, I was working the usual shift. The evening rush had just started to quiet down, and for the first time all day, I felt like I could breathe. I was standing behind the counter, ringing up a customer's order when, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a woman walk in. She wasn't much older than me, probably in her early 20s. She didn't get in line like everyone else, though. Instead, she just stood there, staring. I thought it was odd, but I figured she was just waiting for a friend or something. My attention was mostly on the customer in front of me, so I didn't think much of it. But then, just as the customer finished placing their order, I saw the woman raise her phone, pointed directly at me. I froze for a second, unsure of what to do. Before I could say anything, she snapped a picture, turned on her heel, and walked straight out of the restaurant without a word. The customer I was helping turned around to catch a glimpse of the woman, her eyes wide with confusion. "Did she just take a picture of you?" she asked, clearly as weirded out as I was. I nodded slowly, unsure of what had just happened. For the rest of my shift, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Who was this woman? Had she mistaken me for someone else? Maybe I'd taken her order earlier in the day and she was upset about something. Or maybe it was something more innocent. I shrugged it off, telling myself that people do weird things sometimes, and that was probably the end of it. But it wasn't. A few days later, I was back at work, another late shift. It was quieter than usual, and I was cleaning up behind the counter when the door opened again. I looked up and my heart skipped a beat. It was her, the same woman from the other night. At first I thought maybe I was just being paranoid, but as she stepped inside, I recognized her immediately. She moved the same way, with a strange calmness that set me on edge. And just like before, she didn't get in line. She stood there for a moment, then, like clockwork, pulled out her phone, pointed it at me, and took another picture. This time, I wasn't frozen in shock. I called out, "Hey, what are you doing?" But she didn't respond. She didn't even acknowledge me. She just slipped her phone back into her bag, turned, and walked out, exactly as she had before. I was rattled, to say the least. I told my manager about it, but he just shrugged and said people do weird things sometimes. No big deal, right? Except, to me, it was a big deal. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. A week passed and nothing else happened. I didn't see her again and I started to relax a little, thinking that maybe I'd never have to deal with this strange woman again. But then, something even stranger happened. One afternoon after school, I got home and my mom handed me a letter. "This came for you," she said, looking as puzzled as I felt. I rarely got mail, so I was curious. There was no return address, just my name written neatly on the front of the envelope. I tore it open and inside were 2 photographs. My stomach dropped. They were pictures of me, working behind the counter at McDonald's, the exact moments that woman had snapped those photos. There was no note, no explanation, nothing. Just the photos. I sat there staring at them, trying to make sense of it. Who would do this? And why? I showed the pictures to my parents, and they were just as confused as I was. My mom suggested I tell my boss, so the next time I went into work I did. My boss was concerned but didn't really know what to do. Without a name or any real information about the woman, there wasn't much anyone could do. It was unsettling, to say the least. After that, I never saw her again. No more pictures, no more strange appearances. But the whole experience still lingers in my mind. Who was she? What did she want? And why did she stop? It's been years since that happened, but every now and then I think about those 2 pictures. Silent, mysterious reminders of a stranger's obsession. And I wonder, will she ever come back?